What's very significant about Frank Scarabino, though, is he tells us that he's got a contract to kill Anthony Capo and his kids because he cooperated, and that there's a contract on law enforcement, that they want to go back to the old Sicilian ways to hurt law enforcement because everyone's starting to cooperate.
Welcome to Critical Incidents Podcast, where we explore life-defining moments. I'm your host, Kyle Ashley, a law enforcement veteran with over a decade of experience. Each episode, I'll be interviewing people about their own critical incident, a moment in their lives that shaped who they are today. From life-threatening emergencies to personal struggles, we'll hear firsthand accounts of resilience, determination, and the power of the human spirit. So sit back and let's dive into the critical incidents that shaped their lives and made them who they are. Today, I have Seamus McAlerney. He has spent a lot of time in the FBI, started up in New York, and he has a big background in organized crime. And the most interesting thing that I can't wait to talk to him about is the real life Sopranos, the real life mobs, the things that we have an idea of in our head of watching TV, and he's lived the real life. So welcome, Seamus.
It's great to be here, Kyle.
Awesome. So tell me about where your career started and why you wanted to get into the FBI.
Okay, so my career started in February of 1998. Prior to that, I actually was in banking. I did audit, and I was sitting behind a desk every day, and it just didn't feel like I had a purpose related to that. And I had the privilege of meeting someone that worked for the FBI, and the whole job just seemed intriguing to me. As you can imagine, a lot of Irish people are in law enforcement, and it just seemed I was drawn to that. And I kept on being told by people that I knew that I could never get into the FBI because I didn't have that type of background, and I was just determined to do it. So back then in 1998, it was a very long process to get into the FBI. It was close to two years. I think I've applied in like 1996. There's various steps that you go through. And once you take the first step, you have to wait a couple months to hear if you pass or not. There's like there's a written test, there's a panel that you have. And then finally you get called down to go to Virginia. So I was blessed to do that. So my career started in February of 1998. And that's when this case started, actually, when I was starting to go to Virginia. The case starts when the World Trade Center is robbed. And there was three guys that actually robbed it. And they came out, but they took their mask off. And the mastermind behind that decided to get in front of it to actually try to cooperate with the FBI while the other three guys had gotten locked up. So I was in Virginia. And when you're down there, there's a whole process that you go through when you're in there for about 8 weeks or so. Then they tell you what field office you're going to go to. And I had been told prior that if you're from New York, and I was born and raised here, I was born in the city, raised in the Bronx, and then you're basically told after about 7 or 8 weeks what field office you're going to go to. And I was hoping to come back to New York, because if they had sent me to Texas or someplace, I don't know if I would have been able to deal with that. So I came back to New York in, I think it was May of 1998. The first couple of months, they throw you through our rotation, surveillance, the operations center, and things like that before you actually get assigned to a squad. I had an interest in organized crime. Not that I had any selection related to that. Basically, the Bureau puts you wherever they determine. It's always called the needs of the Bureau. And during that process of 3 or 4 months, I would work as hard as I possibly could. I'd sign up for shifts for nights, weekends. I would try to speak to other people on other squads, speak to supervisors, and try to ingratiate myself to other people to show that I had a good reputation. Because as you know, in law enforcement, your reputation means everything. And in December of 1998, I had the privilege of being selected to go to organized crime. The squad that I got sent to was a squad called C10. That squad handled the Bonanno family, and also because of that crime that I said back in January of 1998 when they robbed the World Trade Center, the gentleman that robbed it was a guy named, or the mastermind behind it was a guy named Ralph Guarino. As I said there before, he was smart enough to try to get out in front of it, and he contacted George Hanna, who was a legendary agent with the FBI, and decided to become a proactive witness. When I say a proactive witness, that means someone who's going to be on the street making consensual recordings. And when you have a proactive witness, you don't know where they're going to take you. And that's the beauty of having a witness like that. That witness just actually happened to take us to the DeCavalcante family. Unbeknownst to the FBI, there was a Brooklyn faction of the DeCavalcante family, which is based in New Jersey. And as a result of this proactive witness, we started to get the DeCavalcante family as well. And that's how I started. I was blessed to get to that squad. And when you're a new agent, you do whatever you're told. You do all the grunt work. You make copies, whatever you're told to do. And you're basically just happy to do it, right? And that case went on from January of 1998. That was one portion of the case. I believe the World Trade Center was robbed on January 14th of 1998. Approximately 9 days later, there was a murder that took place. A gentleman named Joseph Canigliero was killed. He was a mob associate of the DeCavalcante family, and he was a ruthless person who had tortured people and extorted people left and right. And those people basically decided they wanted to kill him because they had enough of being extorted by him. So that was another major crime that started this case. As I said, they proactively ran Ralph until December of 1999. As a new agent, those arrests are going to come up, and I thought that I would be assigned, hoping that I'd be assigned to a team to assist in the arrest. You know, usually when you're the new guy, you're put in the way back rear perimeter. You're not going to get involved. You're not going to go through the door. And unbeknownst to me, I was assigned to be the team leader of a violent soldier named Anthony Capo from Staten Island. Totally surprised at that particular time that I was going to be the team leader on that person. This happens in December of 1999. That's when we decided to take down the case. The reason we took down the case was because there was whispers that they started to hear that Ralph might be cooperating with the government, because they started to think, why wasn't Ralph arrested for the World Trade Center the robbery when everybody else was? And as I said, we operated him for close to 2 years. We had a dedicated surveillance team on him. It was SO2 led by an agent called Joe Sconzo, who was on him every day. And as part of being a new agent, as I said, I did all the grunt work. So some of the grunt work that I did would be to compile all the surveillance logs, make copies, get them into files, make copies for the attorney. The same thing with the recordings. And as you know yourself, when you listen to a recording, which could be an hour long, that could take you all day to do, because you're trying to find a little nugget of conversation within that particular recording. So that was the break that I got, that I was assigned to be the team leader, and I got to arrest Mr. Capo. And one thing led to another, and I was able to arrest him. He wasn't at his location, so all the planning that you do to go arrest him, you show up and he wasn't there. He was at another location, so that goes out the window. And then I go to his house, and I was told he was at his mom's house. So took my team there, arrested him, and he had a bad reputation. Law enforcement hated him. He treated them really, really bad. He was nasty towards them, and law enforcement didn't like him either. I'm a new agent. I saw how George Hanna treated his witness, and as you always hear the old saying, you get more bees with honey. So I was going to treat him with respect regardless. He was going to get a clean slate from me. And being new, I didn't know any better not to. So I used that approach. But more importantly, what I did was I used mental chess. I studied him head to toe. I learned the charges against him. I learned everything about him: date of birth, social security number, where he lived, his phone number. And then when we got him into the car, we read him his rights. He basically invoked his right to counsel, which I wanted him to do that for a reason. I wanted him to do that, so from that point forward, you can't ask him any questions. Then the mental game started, where, of course, I would ask him his questions, what's his date of birth? Before he would answer, I would tell him what his date of birth was. I would tell him what his social security was. I would give him all those answers, kind of food for thought, to let him think, what else does this guy know? Then, since he invoked his right to counsel, then I started to hit him with his charges, such as he was charged with a conspiracy to murder a guy named Charlie Majuri, who was an acting panel boss at that time. And we'll get into that in a minute related to the show. So they didn't kill him. First of all, their plan was to go ring his doorbell and shoot him. Not to do a ring and run, but to ring the doorbell and shoot him. So the way I played with him was I told him, that was a cute plan that you had, that you were going to ring the doorbell and shoot him. And I told him, don't say anything, right? Just listen to what I'm saying and just give him like food for thought. And I did that with all the charges that he actually had to make him think like, how did I know that, right? He didn't know that we had a witness who was recording certain members of the DeCavalcante family who had actually talked about it. So again, if you're sitting there and you have an agent saying this stuff to you and you don't know where it's starting to come from, it's going to make you think about things. So we developed some banter. He was a Cowboy fan. I'm a Steeler fan. So we had a lot of banter related to that. And we kind of spent the whole day together. And because of the relationship that we had developed that day, I think it went a long way. I don't think he had ever been treated with respect before. I think all his interactions with law enforcement were really, really bad. And vice versa. As I said, he was nasty towards law enforcement too. So I think that was an opportunity to him to see the other side of law enforcement where, you know, they're not all bad people, right? Because that's how they think. And we think the same way, right?
Yep.
So about a week or so later, I got a call from his attorney that he wanted to cooperate it. And I almost fell out of my chair, you know, because I was a brand new agent. So I immediately called the attorney and she was very concerned, like, what did I say, right? Did I say the wrong thing? And in these situations, we always know less is more. So I just said, I'll speak to you and I'll get back to him. And that's what we actually did. Now, at that particular point in time, in that family, unbeknownst to me, because I'm a new agent, no one in that family had ever, no made member in that family had ever cooperated before in their 100-year history.
Wow.
So it was a very big deal. And Anthony Capo was a very nasty guy and had a history and a reputation of being a bad guy. So the next stage, and one of the beauties of the book, I believe, is, which I haven't seen happen a lot, is I try to explain things to the public, how cooperation works, how trial works, how the witness security program works, and the different phases of that. Because everyone thinks with the witness security program that you get your ID and you have this nice new life. You go to jail. There's a whole process related to that. So I get into the book related to that. So Anthony Capo decides to cooperate and, you know, high fives and everything that he's going to play ball. I really didn't even know what I had done because I thought I was just doing my job. And the beauty of when someone does cooperate, especially with the mob, A, they don't do crimes by themselves, and B, you never know what they're going to tell you until you sit down. So that started the whole process there. We decided to have the first thing, it's called a proffer, right? Where you bring them in, and you got to be careful about that because you're taking them away from jail. And, you know, bad guys are going to be suspect. Is the guy trying to cooperate with the government or not? So he comes in and I'm with two legendary people, George Hanna, as I said before, and a Southern District investigator named Kenny McCabe, and the attorney. Again, I'm brand new, right? So I don't want to say anything stupid. I want to keep my mouth shut. I give an example of what a proffer is, but I'm letting them lead so I can just listen. And you can imagine, here I am, a new agent. I'm listening and I'm reading books about organized crime. I'm reading about Gotti and Sammy the Bull. And next thing you know, his couple of things that he first tells us is, A, we have a problem, that there's a leak. They knew we were coming. So that's horrible.
Yeah.
He tells us about a murder of a guy named Fred Weiss who was killed on September 11th of 1989 that John Gotti authorized. So here I am. Okay, I've just read a book about the Gottis, and now I'm hearing about it.
Yeah.
And then he tells us about another murder of a guy named John D'Amato, who the FBI knew nothing about. So this is powerful stuff that you're hearing for the first time. And I'm a new agent, and I'm like, oh my God. My dad had a gas station which I worked at when I was a young kid, and I was pumping gas years ago, and now I'm listening to this guy talk about murders like they're nothing.
Yep.
So it was very, surreal to me.
Yeah.
And that's how the case starts. And then because of where he was positioned within the family, he reported to a guy named Vincent Palermo. Now, related to The Sopranos, if you watch The Sopranos, in the first season, there's a guy that dies of stomach cancer, the real boss. Jackie Aprile is in the name of the show. In real life, that's a real life guy. His name was Jake Amari, and he dies in June of 1997. As a result of him dying in 1997, DeCavalcantes then implement a panel of bosses, a three-man panel. Charlie Majuri, Jimmy Palermo, and Vincent Palermo. Vincent Palermo is viewed as the person that has the stronger personality. So he really is the boss, because the official boss is in jail. John Riggi was in jail since 1990. So when you talk about the strip club, the Bada Bing strip club, everyone thinks it's in Jersey and everything, but in reality, Vincent Palermo is the guy that has the strip club, and that's in Queens, and it was called Wiggles. So he really has the strip club. That's what the show is based upon. And there's so many similarities between the show and real life. Like there's a meat market that's in the show. There's a real life meat market. I don't want to say the name of the meat market, but there's a real life meat market that they went to. There's different aspects of the show related to the stock angle aspect. There is a gay aspect related to the show. Not that I'm judging, I don't really care, but that's a portion of the show too, where someone in the DeCavalcante family actually got killed because of that. That was one of the reasons that he got killed. He became, and he anointed himself to be an acting boss in 1991 and got killed. And I know I'm throwing a lot of names at you and you're trying to follow it. It's a lot of information to follow. But there is a lot of similarities between both the show and real life. And that's something that we try to talk about during the book. And what was great for trial is in March of 1999, when we have Ralph out there, we actually have a consensual recording when the show, which started in January, them talking about the show and saying that was priceless for trial.
Yeah.
So at trial, to play that with a transcript to give it to a jury was awesome.
Yeah.
Right? Where they're basically saying who the characters in the show are. It's kind of hard to beat that, right? When you have the guys who are sitting at the table talking about who they are. So that was priceless. So as a result of having no one cooperate, we then get Vinny Palermo to cooperate. Then after him, we get a guy named Victor DiChiara to cooperate. And then we used all their information, which you do. And one thing about the show, one thing about the book that we try to explain to people, because one thing that defense attorneys like to do is they like to say, oh, these guys all got together and got their story straight. And they all got together before they got arrested to say, we're going to cooperate together. You'll read in the book is that Vincent Palermo, before these December 1999 arrests, he wanted to kill everybody. So there was no way someone was going to put up their hand and say, you know what? Here's an idea. Why don't we, if we get arrested, let's cooperate. As I said, right before the arrest, he wanted to kill at least 3 people because he thought they were cooperating. Man. So that would never have happened. So as a result of those 3 guys that I just mentioned cooperating, then we take all their information and we have a huge arrest in October 18th of 2000, which will be coming up on the 25th anniversary very, very soon. And that was called the hierarchy arrest, where we arrest the official boss, the 2 other panel members that we just talked about, captains, soldiers. It was a very significant arrest. What happens after that then is a guy pops out named Frank Scarabino, and he decides to cooperate. So now we go from having nobody to now we have 4 people. What's very significant about Frank Scarabino, though, is he tells us that he's got a contract to kill Anthony Capo and his kids because he cooperated, and that there's a contract on law enforcement, that they want to go back to the old Sicilian ways to hurt law enforcement because everyone's starting to cooperate. So naturally, this is a jolt to me because I'm the one that flipped Capo.
Yeah.
So, a little scary, especially because I'm a young agent. We all know that threats are part of law enforcement. That's what you deal with. But to actually hear it live from the person who's got the contract is a little different, right?
Yeah.
So then he cooperates. And then after that, it just starts to snowball where we get two more people to cooperate as well. And related to the murder that I said started the case in January of 1998, someone who was arrested in December 1999, Tommy DeTore, he comes forward because he sees everyone starting to cooperate. The walls are starting to close. He wants to cooperate. We're able to put him out on bail, again, as like a proactive witness. And he makes one of the best consensual recordings ever, where he gets everyone that's involved in that murder. As I told you, Joe Canigliaro, I forgot to mention, was in a wheelchair. But how it happened was in the 70s, him and another DeCavalcante soldier named James Gallo went to go collect loan shark money from someone they had loaned money to. And James Gallo accidentally shot Joseph Canigliaro. No hard feelings, just a part of doing business, but he paralyzed him. So he was in a wheelchair from 1970s up until his death in, 1990. Even what year it is, 1999, I believe it was.
Wow.
And as I said, he tortured these people and they decided they wanted to kill him. So Tommy DeTore gets everyone who was involved in the murder together. And they talk about their roles in the murder. They say exactly what they did. And a guy named Marty Lewis is the shooter. It's not funny, but it is kind of funny, where he shot him in his car and he's saying this live on tape. He goes, I shot him, I got out of the car, and then Joseph Canigliaro drove away, drove up the block, and he put his signal on. And he drove himself to the hospital.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. So to listen to this, again, it's not funny, but to hear this on tape was like something surreal, right? It's like one of the best recordings the FBI ever had, and to play it at trial was just unreal.
Yeah.
And even before he gets to the hospital, he stops and picks up one of the DeCavalcante's associates who's actually involved in the murder. So you can just think of that guy's eyes when the guy who just got shot pulls up to his house, is beeping the horn for him to come downstairs to help him, when he was just part of the murder, saying, how did he even survive? He's supposed to be dead by now. And that guy gets in the car and goes to the hospital with him.
Wow.
And then, unfortunately, especially since you're in law enforcement, they drive to the hospital, and the guy that was in the car with him, he had a cousin who was an NYPD detective, calls him up. The detective comes and takes shell casings out of the car. So when we have one of our own turn against us, it's something that pisses us all off, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
So he got arrested too.
Yeah.
He eventually got convicted at trial. I think he got close to 13 years. But yeah, so that's how the case starts. We had multiple indictments. It turned into be a 6-year investigation. At the end of the day, I think 71 defendants were convicted. 11 homicides were solved. I had 7 trials back and forth. Anthony Capo testified at least 7 times. I think you can classify him. He turned into a professional witness for us.
Yeah.
We had 7 people cooperate during that time frame. It turned out to be a historic case. One of the reasons I write the book too is that squad C10, it turned out that we were dismantling 2 families at the same time. And no one really has put that together. So half the squad was working the DeCavalcantes. The other half of the squad was working the Bonanno family. And if you ever do any research on that, we dismantled 2 families at the same time. So this is a very young squad that kind of just bonded together, the mentors that we had, and we really just gelled. And it was just great to see everyone kind of have each other's backs and just grow together. And, we did historic work. And whenever you work these types of cases, it's never just one person. And if you ever hear someone that says that it is one person, run like hell because they're lying. It's like it takes a team to do this. And that's what we were. We were a great team.
That's awesome. I've always thought about this. So I think about when I was in law enforcement, you mentioned then this other person came and they wanted to be a witness. And so can you explain how, like when they decide, hey, I want to be a witness for the FBI, how do they contact you? Because I can think about how I did it as a detective, but like what do you do for the FBI? Like how do they get in contact with you? How did that happen?
There's all sorts of ways to do it. You could have your attorney call us. Frank Scarabino, the person that I had said there before, after that October 2000 arrest, he was in jail. So how he did it was he went to one of the guards at the local prison and said, hey, I have very important news to tell you. There's a contract on a witness's head. So that obviously is going to get someone's attention. And he even said to the guard, he goes, this might get me killed because you don't know if the guard is good or bad too, right?
Yeah.
So he took a chance and he goes, but I need to get this out there. And, talk about ethics or morals, he said that crossed the line for him. When you're starting to hurt kids, he goes, I could never do that. He goes, it's the life. Killing someone because of the life is one thing, but when you get children involved, it's a different level. So that's one way to do it, right? Where you try to pass a note through a guard or something. There's other ways. Like one thing that we used to always do, especially as I became a supervisor of the Colombo Bonanno family later, is sometimes when you go on arrest, right, you might take someone's phone. And when you arrest someone, emotions are high, people aren't thinking straight, they could be angry, they could be hostile. When you arrest someone, it's not just you, the families are involved. So when you possibly take a phone, right, which you have to give back, it's a way when you go back, it's a different set of circumstances. And it's happened a lot, even we can talk about the Colombo family later, is it gives you an opportunity to speak to a family member on a different level.
Yeah.
And they might be thinking clearer now. And that, depending on the bond that the defendant has with their family, that might be an avenue where they might want to try to cooperate as well. So there's all different avenues to kind of get the word out, And then sometimes I've had people flip on the way to 26 Federal Plaza.
Yeah.
So it all depends, but there's various ways to get the word out there. You know what I mean? You just have to be careful, right? Because you're taking a chance that you're going to trust someone if it's not you that's giving them the word. So,
Yeah.
And then there's a whole process, right? Defense attorneys, I know they're just doing their job. They want to get their client off. But we have to vet out. It's not like someone comes in and you're like, okay, we're just going to use this guy as a witness, as like, yourself. You have to vet these people out. It's not like you're just going to believe their story. You have to either through phone records, through receipts, you have to verify things. Like you're constantly trying to verify things. We had so many witnesses that you're checking each other's story. You never tell the witnesses the other story that you're hearing. You're trying to analyze that, right? And there's going to be differences. Like if me and you had been friends for 15 years and we saw something, we're going to have different accounts to it, right? Like you might think the car was light blue. I might say it's dark blue. But as long as we knew it was a car as opposed to a van, right?
Yeah.
It's like there's going to be differences and you expect differences. If me and you said the exact same thing, that would be kind of odd, right?
Yeah.
That would be like, okay, we coached them or we told them what to say. That never happens. There's always going to be a minor difference. If there wasn't, that'd be a little concerning then, right? Because that would mean that you kind of led them. There's always going to be a slight difference. And, that's what defense attorneys try to say, that we told them what to say. We never tell them what to say. And Anthony Capo, he testified so many times, and he was a very violent person. They were really surprised to see how calm and composed he was on the stand each time. Now, that I did help him with. I taught him, even I can lose my temper too at times. And I kind of had to refrain myself. And I said, if I want him to be a good witness, I have to control myself too. I wouldn't tell him what to say. I just told him sometimes you just have to eat it. And what I mean by that is he did a lot of drugs.
Yeah.
He did so many drugs, right? So I told him, if they ask you about drugs, just say yes. Don't try to justify it. Don't try to say, oh, I only did crack 3 times. Or I only did this 4 times, or I did it because I was having a bad day. Just say yes. If you say yes, they have nowhere to go. And that's what he learned to do. And he got really good at it, right?
Yeah.
And that's how you try to keep them calm. And then, as I said, when he did like try to testify in court, he did a great job. And I said, I think it became a job for him, where at first no one wants to testify at all, right? They're like, do we have to testify? They all want them to plead guilty. And that's another thing too, right? People say, when I speak to a lot of people, they're like, why would you take a plea as opposed to going to trial? Well, they don't understand, especially nowadays, getting 12 people to agree on anything is extremely hard to do, right?
Yes.
When you have a plea, it's done. It's over. They pled guilty to that particular crime. They have a set sentence and it's over. When you have a trial, like in this case, it goes on for years. There's an appeal process. So there's constant back and forth. So that's why we take pleas, right? And I've had people take pleas for 40 years, 50 years, and that's crazy, right? When you think about it. So you got to look at it their side too. But what I always tell people is numbers are better than letters. Letters mean life, and letters mean
Yeah.
you're coming out in a box. So
Yeah, most certainly. No, that makes sense. I think one of the things that I really wanted to ask you was, as you're working these cases, did you ever, and I'm sure you did, like most cops do at some point, but like have empathy for the people that you're investigating? You're like, oh man, I feel bad for this person, but obviously you have your job to do. And I don't know how that is in this type of organized crime, because I feel like this is a really family oriented thing that they're committing, organized crime with. But the empathy of like the stories you're hearing and the way that they're living their life. Can you expand a little bit on that and kind of like what your thoughts were as you were investigating this?
well, the acts that they committed, the victims, I don't condone any of that. And I really do feel for the victims. That's a struggle that you have, right? Where you need these witnesses to solve these crimes. So, and that's something that you have to kind of deal with, right? Where you need this person to actually get to the next level. But I don't condone any of the crimes that they actually did commit. Second of all, when you have a witness, it's just not the witness. You have to deal with the family. And as I say all the time, you can't pick your family, right?
Yeah.
So, these people have wives, they have kids, and you want to make the best for them. So we have to help them, get them into schools, get them relocated. And you really do become a social worker. Like we used to joke about that, where we are certified social workers because obviously they're going to have issues related to this, right? And there's different types of witnesses that you have. Like I kind of explained there before, a proactive witness. And there's different ways to go about that. There's witnesses that tell their wives and witnesses that don't when they're proactively cooperating. Now, think about this, because I had this happen. We had a witness when I had the Colombo family that proactively cooperated. And then sometimes these things come to an abrupt end, right? Because something happened, someone could get hurt. So can you imagine, and this did happen, this guy owned a nightclub. The gig was up. We had to take him off the street. So 2 agents picked him up and said, it's over. It's time to go. Going back to his house that morning at 4 o'clock in the morning and telling his wife, guess what? We're out of here. She had no idea. So can you imagine that? Like, she's like, you've been doing what? You didn't tell me. And now I'm moving with the kids that were in danger. So it all depends on how that goes, right? But you really do feel for the families because you just don't know. And then the witnesses themselves, it's all how they're raised. Sometimes they don't have a chance, right? We're not in their shoes. Who are we to judge them, right? As I think I even write in the book, they'll be judged at a later date. That's not up for me to do, right? We are here to do our job. And that's something that I was taught at a very young age as an agent. Don't make this personal, right? Just do your job and don't get offended by what you hear. And trust me, we've heard it all, right? You've heard the worst of the worst. So nothing's going to surprise us. So sometimes I do feel bad for them because of the way that they were raised. There was a witness, Anthony Rotundo, very smart guy. He went to college, for God's sake. Very smart guy.
Yeah.
But how he was raised, his father was in the life. His father got killed. He became a made member of the DeCavalcante family at a very young age. He really didn't have a choice. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So he becomes a witness. He goes into the witness security program. He gets a second chance and he kills it. He does a great job. Starts his own business, extremely successful.
Wow.
So he's a success story.
Yeah.
And, related to the mob and the rules of the mob, it's like he was a scholar. He could cite verse, and he was that smart, and he was a stickler for the rules.
Yeah.
As I was talking about before, there was a gentleman who got killed, John D'Amato, who in 1991, he anoints himself to be the acting boss. John D'Amato gets killed because he was going to sex clubs with his girlfriend and having sex with men. And the girlfriend basically tells Anthony Capo about this. And Anthony Capo is like, we can't have an acting boss, especially 35 years ago, things have changed now, being the boss of our family who's gay. Bad look, what he would say. So he reports that up the chain, and they decide he's got to be killed. Anthony Rotundo says he should be killed because John D'Amato was borrowing money from all the other mob families because he had a bad gambling habit. And he basically was gambling all the money away, but he was borrowing the money, saying it was for the family. So that's why he said he should be killed. So they eventually decide to kill him, and they don't get approval from the other families to do it. And Anthony Capo gets the order from his superiors, and he kills him. So, that's part of kind of the show too, where you have the gay, like you have the gay angle there too. So, that's one thing as well. So yeah, do you sometimes feel bad for these guys? Yeah, like you do, because you don't know how they're raised, right? And who are we to judge, really?
Yeah. Yeah. All the times that, we look at the cases we worked, it's almost like if you had put this much effort into legitimate things, my goodness, you would have been so successful. And, just like you mentioned, like just turned their life around, started their own business and is doing great,
And we say that all the time, right? If you had just applied it to good stuff, you'd be very successful, because a lot of these mob guys are smart, it's just they don't apply themselves in the right way. So.
Yeah, the work ethic, my goodness, working that much time during the day.
No, it's true. It's true.
So with these families, and as you're working these families, is it just the New York part is like the head of the family not in the United States? They're in a different country?
No, for this particular family, for all the New York families, they're all here.
Okay.
And they basically control all the states. So this particular family, the official boss at that time was John Riggi, Riggi. Because he was in jail, they had to anoint like an acting boss, because he's the official boss. He has since, and we did indict him too, and then he pled guilty and got another 10-year sentence. I think he got out in like 2015 or 16 and has since passed away. But all the major families, their bosses are here. Now, this particular family did originate from Italy, though, and I believe they're from Ribera. That's how they first started.
Yeah.
But yeah, they're all the bosses, all the heads of the boss of the family are here. And New York basically controls everything. There might be subsets throughout different states, but, the power is here.
Wow. And when you're flipping these guys and the hits come out, at what point in time were you ever like, I think you kind of touched on it a little bit, but was there ever a point in time where you're like, oh, wow, is this worth it? Like, am I going to get killed because I'm doing my job?
When we first heard about the threat, it was kind of a jolt, but, I always thought it was worth it because you have a mission to do. And what had happened was I had worked the mob for close to 15 plus years. I think because I worked the mob so long, they kind of got to know me. As I said, I worked this family from 98 up until 2004. And then after that, they wanted me to go down and run the Colombo family. And I did that until 2013 or so. In 2011, I spearheaded the largest FBI mob arrest, where we arrested 127 people. After that, the Bureau decided to reduce the resources, and then they gave me the Bonanno family. So at that point in time, I had the Bonanos, the Colombos, and the Jersey family as well. And during that time period, I think the mob got to know me, and I think there might be some recordings out there of them actually saying I kind of knew what I was doing. You know what I mean? So I think there was a level of respect, you know, and that's the whole thing. I always treated people with respect because I always told the agents too. At one point in time, you're going to have to turn the badge in. So don't try to be a tough guy if you're not a tough guy. You know what I mean? And these guys are going to size you up really, really quickly.
Yeah.
And that goes the same on their side too. Sometimes they try to be a tough guy and they're not. So it works both ways.
Yeah. So behind the scenes, when you're working all of these families, what's something that the public wouldn't think about when you talk about RICO cases, right? So when we're talking about racketeering and all of these different stuff, what's something the public in your book, right? So you're writing this book. What is something that they're like, I don't understand why there's an office in the prosecution side of the federal prosecutors that has to go to a RICO specific section just to be able to, bring these cases to court. So can you kind of expand on that and how you worked it?
Well, I think the federal level, the agents work very closely with the AUSAs. I think that's a big difference from the state level,
Yes.
right? And the sense is, even at trials, and the way that I was always raised is I work very closely with them where I want them to be part of the investigation. Also, when there's a trial, we're sitting at the trial table and I'm working with them related to the strategy and on
Okay.
how things should actually do. Because who knows the case better than the agent, right?
Nobody. Yeah.
And there's constant notes going back and forth. So I'm always about the teamwork. Related to RICO, you have to basically establish that there's an organization, right? And then you have to know how the law works, where you have to have two predicate acts within 10 years. And they're committing the acts in furtherance of the organization. And that's why we need the witnesses, right? We need the witnesses to establish who's a made member or who's an associate of the families. And RICO is such a powerful tool, right? If you get convicted, you can get up to 20 years. So, and the way it works is, if you get people within that 10-year time period, then you can go back in time.
Mm-hmm.
So that's how sometimes you have these cases that go back 40 to 50 years because you're showing someone who's been in the life for that long.
Yeah.
And then, with related to RICO, there's prosecution. It's a memo, it's called, which has to go down to headquarters and they have to approve it. So that's basically like a playbook, right? It outlines your entire case and headquarters has to approve that to move forward. And of course, you go to a grand jury and, the grand jury has to approve it. But the key is establishing an organization. Now, what I did too is I worked the mob for about 15 years. And then after that, I worked violent gangs. And we had a problem up in Mount Vernon, and I was tasked with going up there to handle that problem. And what I did is I used RICO to attack them. And they had never done that before. And I worked with a task force officer, Eddie Murphy, and then another agent, Kevin O'Donnell. And the three of us were able to put together a case. And these were like young gangs, like young kids that were just killing each other. It was really, really sad because they were so young, just disregard for life. And they had never gotten anyone to cooperate there. And we were very successful in getting people to flip. And that was rewarding because you felt like you kind of saved some lives there and got them to change their life around. But we used RICO there too. The same thing, establish an organization, meaning the gang, and then getting them that they were committing crimes to further the gang.
Yeah.
So RICO is a powerful tool.
Yeah. And isn't one of the predicate offenses supposed to be like a violent offense, or what we consider a violent offense has to be at least one of the predicate offenses?
That it could be taking things across state lines, a firearms charge, conspiracy to murder. There's murder. There's RICO and there's RICO conspiracy. Those are two different things.
Yeah.
So you could get convicted of RICO, or no, I'll say you could get acquitted of RICO, and then I can come back and charge you with RICO conspiracy.
Yeah.
So you get two bites at the apple. So it's a very great tool to have.
Yeah. And I think
And
it's
then,
important.
and then, when you have pleas, it's like years and years ago, what you would do is, or what the bad guys would want is they would plead guilty if you didn't touch their money.
Mm.
So they'd be willing to do a little bit more time if you didn't touch their money.
Yeah.
And then probably in the last 15 to 20 years or so, the government was like, you know what? We want your money. You'll even see when you read the book, we had an issue at trial where one of our witnesses basically didn't tell us about some money. So that became an issue at trial, and we had to go and seize that money. So I don't want to give the whole story away, but you should read it, and it just shows you how things are. As I said before, we had 7 people cooperate during that time period. For 100 years, we had no one. Then we got 7 people to cooperate. And what's crazy is that little time period, no one has cooperated since. So 25 years and counting. So we had this unique time period where we got 7 people to kind of break ground and talk to us. And now no one has talked to us since. So
Wow.
a very historic squad of people together. And then I said, at the same time, we're actually doing the Bonanno family too.
That's wild. That is wild. And so
And
were you recognized, or was the whole section recognized by the White House?
well, that's what that comes from. In 2013, that's when I had moved on to the Colombo family. And this is just like the first part. If I ever have time, because I work a full-time job, if I ever have time, there might be a second book too, related to the Colombo / the Bonanno family. Is we were very successful dismantling those families, because as I said, I got the Bonanno family after. We were very successful with the Colombo family. In 2013, I was invited to meet the president based upon my work on those 2 families, where we had dismantled those 2 families. We were put up for an award. It's one thing to bump into the president, see him somewhere, but it's a different thing to be invited to the White House. And it wasn't just me, it was for the squad. And I wanted to bring a representative from the Bonanno side and from the Colombo side. Unfortunately, they wouldn't let that happen. So I was really bummed about that, because I really wanted to do that, because I thought it was the right thing to do. But there's a whole background check that they do. It's really, really tight security. I went there, and I'm in a room with all these really, really smart people from NASA, like a scientist that had invented something. And what was really neat was I was there with Tony Mendez. Tony Mendez is the guy from Argo, got the hostages out.
Yes.
So I got to meet him. He was honored there too. And I'm in this room. I'm like, what am I doing here? You know what I mean? So the president was great. This was his second term. So, you see these pictures when the president starts and when he ends. And to me, he looked really frail, but he just wanted to thank me for all the work I did against organized crime. So it was a really tremendous accomplishment. I felt really great about that. Here you have a guy from the Bronx who's been invited to the White House to be commended for his work. So that was a big treat for me.
That's awesome. And you even got internationally recognized for this.
Yeah, well, related to the DeCavalcante case, there was the U.S. Attorney's Award that the team got, which was great. There was also an award from New Jersey that we got, which is, kind of strange when you kind of step back and think about it, where you had the New York FBI take down the Jersey family.
That's interesting. Yeah.
We did extend the olive branch to the New Jersey FBI at the time, and for some reason or another, they just decided not to work with us. Very short-sighted on their part, because we had all the witnesses, but they just decided not to. We got an award from New Jersey as well. So I've been blessed to be gotten a lot of awards throughout my career, even overseas as well. But as I said before, It's never just me. It's the teams that we had and everyone that had worked together.
Yeah, most certainly. And it's so awesome that you write a book about this because, this text will live, forever. And the things that you did, I think about like how New York was in the early 2000s and then from 2001 on, in just like going there and visiting and then going there and visiting now and how much different it is. It's not even the same. It doesn't feel the same. And there's an old school cop mentality back then. And, having those stories written is so great for other officers to read, right? Because I didn't get into law enforcement until 2008. And so you were years before me. And it's really cool to hear all of the things that you did and how you did them and how things worked. And it's really cool to hear. And I'm excited to have everyone read the book because I think it's going to be a great experience for them.
And then, throughout this whole thing, what happened too, unfortunately, we had 9/11 as well. So that kind of, put everything on hold where there was cases that we had and, that became to an abrupt stop. It's like those cases went on hold and all our resources were dedicated to that investigation. And that was a horrible, horrible day. And that's something I'll just never forget. So there's a story about that. There's a lot of chapters about that, the things that we went through. There's some friends that I lost. I had a friend who actually was married a month to the day.
Okay.
Yeah. So, but I was able to help out his wife at the time because we were able to find his car. And I was able to get his personal belongings. His name was Kevin Frawley. And we were able to get his belongings and actually retrieve them. His car was destroyed because what happened back then was all the soot and everything. So the car was destroyed, but we were able to get his belongings and actually retrieve them to give them back to his wife.
God.
But there's a lot of stories just in the book related to that too. And it was horrible to see. But one thing that I will say, even to this day, every 9/11, the public, the support that they gave you, I don't know if you've ever been to New York or not, but the West Side Highway, right before the World Trade Center there, I forget the name of the street, but there was a contingency of people that would gather before you went into the pit. They were there every day and every night, and they would cheer you on as you went in there. And that just got you so pumped up to work. And now every year they're still there to kind of, give you that support.
Wow.
Yeah, that was just a crazy time.
Yeah, I can't imagine.
And like you basically worked that for a couple of months. So I didn't even see the witness for a couple of months. And there's a lot of stuff in like the book too. There's some personal stuff too. It's like, I didn't even talk about this, but when all this was happening, when I arrest Capo and then he flips, my father is really sick and he dies.
Oh,
so there's a lot of stuff that happened there too. And, just real quickly, I'm at the funeral home and my phone rings. And it's Anthony calling me to offer his condolences. It's like really, really, surreal stuff. So there's just a lot of stories. And I think, as I said, the book, I tried to just explain things related to WITSEC, the proffer process, how trials work, direct examination, cross-examination, how juries only see what they see. Yeah. They don't see the madness behind closed doors. Yes. How the, defense attorneys and the government are fighting, how the judge is starting to yell at people, how the sidebars are. It's like there's a lot of stuff that the juries don't see.
Yeah. And
to me personally, trial is 24/7, but trial is the best because trial is where you learn, right?
Yes.
And, what I used to always, even to this day, when people write reports, I'm a stickler for it because I tell people, I always think about trial because a defense attorney will tear you a new one if you make any types of mistakes.
Yes.
And just like what you'll see in the book too is I actually did a year of trials from December of 2002 all the way up until November of 2003. We had 3 trials. And as you know yourself with trials, it's not like, okay, you just show up at trial. There's the strategy before, you got to prepare. There's months that go into it. We had multiple people set up for trial and then they would plead. So they would get out of the case. strategy changes.
Yeah.
Then we had another trial where there was a mistrial. So that kind of changes things. So there was just constant plea negotiations going back and forth. And, the biggest trial I had was close to 2 months. So, and then what happens is all day you're at trial. And then at night, you're prepping the next witness.
Prepping.
So it's just that whole year was crazy. And then you probably don't even remember, but in 2003, there was a blackout. That
No, I don't
August
remember that. Oh, wow.
for the whole Northeast.
Oh, my goodness.
We were on trial. So our witness was on trial. So there's a whole story related to that, which is crazy. And it was an interesting night for me. But yeah, there's that whole year was just crazy. It's like there's things that you learn too. There was a time period where there's a lot of reports that I had to write, right? I would meet with him and he would tell me about his history of crime. And he was a bad dude. So I'd be kind of like looking up a little bit at him because I'm hearing everything that he did, from home invasions to extortions, everything. I think at the end of the day, he pled guilty to 2 murders, 11 murder conspiracies.
Wow.
And then every other crime you could think of. That's what he pled to. And I kind of explained that to the public as well, in the sense is when these guys come in, they're charged with X, right? And then you have a proffer, and the first thing that you do is you make them eat the indictment. What I mean by that is you want to make sure that you got your charges initially correct, that they tell you everything in the indictment is actually true, so that they can't dispute it later. So before you talk about everything else, you want to make sure that what they're charged with, they're going to admit their guilt. Then you move on. And then when you plead guilty, they plead guilty to every crime that they've ever committed, so that no one can come back to them later and say, you didn't tell them about X or Y or Z.
Yeah.
And you always try to tell them, don't try to hold the golden type of nugget later. You have to tell us that now.
Yeah.
So yeah, he pled guilty to a lot of crimes. So I explained that too, how that all process works as well. Because I think it's important for the public to know that, because I don't think they really get that. You know what I mean?
It's interesting the way that you describe it like that, because if they are leaving out that one piece of information, then guess what? In 2 years, whenever you get out, like, we can come back for that, right? So in those different things where you're like, don't leave that low-hanging fruit. Make it easier for you up front too.
And you never want the defense attorney to tell you something that you don't know.
Yeah.
Right? You don't want to be on cross examination and the defense attorney say, "Oh, did he tell you about this?" And you're like, "Nope, that's going to be a problem, because then you just lost the jury." Right?
Yeah. Yep.
And what people don't realize too is, if a witness that you have, like shits the bed, you're kind of done with them then. So, and that kind of happened in this case too, in the sense is there's always a race to see where the witness is going to testify, right? This was a Southern District of New York case, but there's also an Eastern District of New York. So initially there was a race to arrest Anthony to see who would get him first, right? And then when we had him in the Southern District, there was a case in the Eastern District where they wanted to have him testify there first. So that's a gamble, because you're like, if he testifies there and doesn't do well, then we're done with it.
Yeah.
And what happened in that case was there was a guy named Joe Watts from the Gambino family. He had a case and they wanted to use him. And I had been told, don't rush writing your reports.
Yes.
I was like, okay, made that mistake once, never again. So I was getting ready to go on a cruise with my friends from the Bronx, who are my friends to this day, friends for life.
Yes.
I grew up on 207th and Bainbridge Avenue. Getting ready, pumped to go on a cruise. And then I'm told they need your reports. And I'm like, I was told that no need to rush. No, they need Anthony to testify in Joe Watt's case. They need your reports by Thursday. This is a Monday. I had to go down to my basement on a Monday night, from Monday night until Thursday morning, and do nothing but write 100 reports.
Yeah.
I didn't leave my basement.
Oh my goodness.
People would just bring me food and leave. And as I said there before, you don't want to make mistakes, grammar, spelling, because defense attorney is going to come at you. So I basically did 100 reports in 3 days without sleeping, nothing. And I had to turn them over for Joe Watts. And then he eventually pled guilty as opposed to going to trial. So forget about the 7 times that Anthony had testified in court. There was numerous times where he was prepped for trial and people decided to actually plead guilty as opposed to going to trial.
Wow.
So he was a tremendous guy. Him and also Anthony Rotundo, probably the best witnesses for this particular case.
Yeah.
So I try to give the public as much information as I possibly can related to that. And at the end of the day, the thing that was great is, as I said, the show was just beginning. And then you have us investigating the family at the same time.
That's
and
crazy.
then people ask me, why did you write the book? And there was a couple of reasons. I was blessed to have a great career. People were saying, Seamus, you should write a book. And I was like, I don't know if this is really for me. And then I just decided to do it. Second of all was the squad, the press. We got so much positive press from the both families. They never put it together that it was the same squad. So I want to get that out there.
Yeah.
And really, as I said, my teammates, squad mates, my partner, Stacy Bowery, was tremendous. I would go through more doors with her than guys.
Right.
That's how much I trusted this girl.
That's awesome.
And then for Anthony, because Anthony never got the credit that he really deserved. And I don't know the relationship that he has with his family, with his children, but hopefully this book kind of shows that, yes, he was a really bad guy, but he turned his life around and he did a lot of good. Yeah. And as I said, he never really got the credit that he should have gotten because he did pass. Hopefully there's some good that does come out of this for his family that shows that he was a guy that was able to turn his life around. And again, I don't condone any of the crimes that he did. Heinous stuff, this home invasions is the one crime that kind of irks me. When you go into someone's house, you put them down. And, there was a couple of times where he pretended that he was a cop, which is a horrible thing to do, right? Where the false type of pretense there. But as I said, hopefully the family sees this and they actually see that he did do some good.
That's awesome. Where can everyone go and get a copy of the book?
Okay, you can go to Amazon or you can go to Barnes & Noble. It's going to be released on the 28th, but I'm already hearing now that it's being sent out now, so I guess you can get it now. The website is flippingcapo.com. We'll show you where some of the book the signings are, And it's called Flipping Capo, How the FBI Dismantled the Real Sopranos.
That's awesome. And to leave us, can you give us one principle that has led you through your career, something that you've always fell back on that has made you look back on your career and say, if I wouldn't have stuck to this one principle, I don't know that I would have made it to where I am today?
Well, I think persistence beats resistance. I'm a very persistent person, and there's been a lot of roadblocks along the way, and I've just refused to not go through the roadblocks.
That's awesome.
And then I used to always tell my squad, don't seek credit. Credit will find you.
Great words. Great words. Seamus, I really appreciate the interview. I'm excited to read this book. And thank you so much for sitting down and telling me all about your career and the way that these cases are. It is fantastic to have this in written form forever. And I'm excited for everyone to go and read your book.
Well, thank you, Kyle. It's been great to be here. This has been a lot of fun.
To be featured on the show, email us at criticalincidentspod@gmail.com.